So I hope you had a great lunch because the talks are starting right now. So please give a warm welcome to Gabrielle Botbol for Android applications and APIs hacking.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you. So thank you everyone for being here today. I'm very happy to present at Hackfest. So today I'm going to talk about Android application and API pentest. So first I'm going to briefly present myself. So I'm an offensive security advisor at Desjardins, and I trained myself to become a pen tester. And I used a program in 6 steps with conferences, MOOCs, volunteering, CTF, summer schools, and internship. And I'm involved in multiple cybersecurity communities. And I won multiple awards. And so today we are going to talk about what is Android application pentest, how to set up a lab, and how to pentest Android applications and their APIs. And finally, I will provide a link with multiple resources that could be helpful if you want to go into hacking Android application. So first, what is Android? So Android is a mobile operating system which is based on a modified version of the Linux kernel. And it was created by Google. And so the most used language for Android application is Java. But since 2019, the official language is Kotlin, which is a simplified version of Java. So you can use other languages like C++ or Python, for example, but they would not be fully supported. So the Android architecture is divided into 5 main layers, so you can see them here. And so you have the Linux kernel layer, which is down here. So this is going to be the basic system functionality with hardware abstraction, device drivers, and memory management, and also process management and security. And then you have this here, which is the native libraries layer. So this is going to be like a set of C and C++ libraries. And so they will provide the core functionality of the Android OS. So it's going to be libraries for example, graphic renderings, multimedia playback, database management, and more. Then you have the Android runtime layer. So this is basically the Dalvik virtual machine, and it's responsible for running Android applications. And then you have the application framework layer, which is for APIs and tools that developers use to create Android applications. So it has a wide range of components like activities, services, content providers, broadcast receivers, and it will enable developers to create rich and interactive applications. And finally, you have the application layer, which is where applications like Contact, like games, and any other are installed. So now that this is cleared up, I'm going to dive into explaining the pen test of an Android app. But first, there is something I'd like to clarify. Oops. So what is Android app pen test? So it's a type that is a part of the pen test that pen testers usually provide. And so most pen testers are going to be generalists. It really depends, but sometimes we want to specialize, and we can specialize in mobile or cloud, or there are a lot of different ways to specialize, and you can have also multiple specializations. And so Android app is going to be different from other pen tests because most of the time we will have an executable to analyze. But for example, for a web application pen test, we are going to have an URL, and we are going to go to the web app. And for external pen test, we'll have an IP address. So the difference here is that we rarely, it can happen, but we rarely rely, we rarely analyze an executable or code when we do web apps. And also, it depends on the methodology we use. But most of the time, it's only on Android app, like on Android app, we are going to have an application to analyze. So why Android application pen test? So even if Google Play carefully check the app in the store, many are still vulnerable or even dangerous. So I took this article. It's getting older now, but I took it because I was really shocked, because this was a family of app by Telitech, and it was installed 3 million times on Android, and it was a malware family. So it was basically subscribing user to premium services without them even knowing about it. So it took around 6 months to Google to remove some of the applications, and then it took more long to remove it completely. So here are some also interesting figures. I think they are really impressive. We have the fact that mobile apps are more and more targeted, and also 75% of phishing sites are made specifically for mobile devices. And this one here, the increase in exploited zero day, I think it's really, really crazy. So today, I'm going to show the methodology for Android app and API pen test. So let's go for what about Android APIs? So why do developers use APIs? Well, it's really helpful to access to remote data. So for example, if you want to get a weather forecast, if you want to get social media updates and a news feed, it's really, really convenient. And also, it will also help to integrate third-party services. So, for example, payments gateway, social media platforms, cloud storage services. So it's really a standardized way to integrate these services. So it also helps to improve app performance. So it will reduce the amount of data that needs to be transferred between the app and the server. And so it requests only the data that they need. So it will reduce the load on the server, and it will improve the app response time. And also, it's a way to avoid to reuse code. So instead of writing also from scratch, you just use. Sorry, it's not. You avoid to writing code from scratch. You are going to be able to actually code that is already made. So it will save time and effort for developer. And also, it's flexible and scalable. And so you have a way to separate back-end and front-end, and you can modify the back-end without having to modify the front-end. And so, and if they want, of course, developers can make their own APIs and have more control over the data and functionality, and they can also monetize their API. So, what is the Android application pen test process? So first, we are going to define the scope and talk about the legal matters. So it's going to be the planning phase. It's the same for every pen test engagement. Then we have reconnaissance, as usual in a pen test also. And here, what we can do is to go on Google Play and do some reconnaissance on the company. And then you have also static analysis. So this is when you are going to look at the code and check for specific elements there. And we will see a little later how we can do that. And then we have dynamic analysis. So this is the part where we are going to intercept the traffic and look for vulnerabilities. And finally, we have the report part, where we are going to present and explain the findings we had. And so I will also give detailed explanation on these three phases right after. So the lab is much bigger than in other types of pentest in the way that it takes some tools that you have to install. And so I'm going to show you how to set up the lab first. So these are the tools that you will need. So you will need JADX. JADX is going to be used to decompile the code for analysis. And you can also use APK tool. It will go further than JADX because this way you can decompile the code. You will reverse engineer the APK, and you can make modification to the code, and then you can just put it back into an APK and use your modified APK. With ADB, this tool, it's going to be used to interact with the device or the VM. And in this example, I'm going to show you how to use with the VM. And we are going to use also Android Studio for the creation of the VM. And Burp Suite for request and response interception. Okay, so how to set up the lab? You can definitely feel free to take pictures of the commands. This lab setup here is made for Ubuntu. But you can check the resources at the end here to have more explanations for other systems. But for JADX, you need Java, so you will have to use this command to install Java. And then you use this command to install JADX, and then you just need to launch JADX using this command here. And then to install ADB, you just have to do this command here. So it does not have requirements, and it will probably install them on their own. And then you can install APK tool. So this documentation is pretty straightforward. So and for Android Studio also, and Burp Suite also. The last here are pretty straightforward, and the documentation is well made. So you can definitely follow what you see on the website. So first video demo I'm going to show you is how to set up the lab and create an emulator. So I just need to launch the video. Okay, so here you go to Android Virtual Device Manager, and you can add here, you can create a new virtual device, and then you choose which phone model you need. But it really depends what you like. I like to work on a big screen usually, but it really depends what you want. And then you can click on Next, and then you have to choose depending to the API level, because you can check if your application, which API level you need for your application you are going to test. So here I took just this one for the sake of the example, and then you click Next, you give it a name, and you should be good to go. Like, you click on Finish. And it's going to create the virtual machine, and then you just click here to launch it. And it's going to take a while, but I can go a little further to show you what it looks like once it loads a little, and then it looks like this. So you have welcome and everything. So next is how to configure Burp. This is actually, so I'm not going to cover certificate pinning because I cover it here in my Git book, and it will take much more time. And you also have a practical example, and you have 2 challenges on Hack the Box that are very good and that actually tackle this subject. So I'm just going to show you how to configure Burp for now. So first is you have to go to the Proxy tab, and you go to Options, and you are going to need the certificate. So this is the certificate you are going to need to install in your VM. So you select a folder that you will use later, so you have to remember where you actually put it. And you choose the .cer extension. And then you save. You click on next, and it says the certificate were exported. So now you just need to drag and drop it, or you can push it, but I mean, it's easier to drag and drop. You can drag and drop it in here. And then you have to go to the settings to actually install it on the mobile. So you go to settings, you go to security. So there's, yeah, and then you go to, I never remember, install from SD card. Okay, so you don't go to this one here, you go to internal storage, so there's a little glitch on the video here, but it's internal storage. And then you go to download, and you get your certificate here. So you can give it a name that you will remember. So I put burp, I mean, it's obvious. And then it's going to ask you for a lock pin. So you choose a pin. I choose not to retype it, but you do as you want. And you take a very, very, very safe pin like this, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then, so I deactivate the notification because it can be annoying. And then it says burp is installed, so you're good to go for this part. But you know you have to go back to burp to make the setup so that it actually intercepts the communications. So you have to add and bind to all interfaces, and you choose another port because, well, I usually use 8080 for web application pen test, so I use 8082 for mobile app. And this way, this is going to allow you to actually intercept the traffic. One last thing you have to do, you can do it here, or you can do it on the phone. I'm going to show you it here, is to make sure that the proxy is set up. And one tricky thing that took me a while to understand why it wasn't working is because you actually have to click on apply when you change something here. So don't do like me, don't spend forever to understand why it didn't work. Just click apply, and when you intercept, you're going to be able to, so you put the intercept on, you check it's on, and then you can launch the web browser, and you will have all the HTTP requests here. And you're good to go for burp. So for the example, I use these two vulnerable applications. You can get them, if you want to practice, it's very good. You can use Axebox, but these two are also very interesting to practice. One is, they're a little outdated now, but it's still nice to work on them. And of course, yes, I have to say, just be careful. You can pen test only for obvious reason. If you are allowed to test, don't test something you're not allowed to test. Okay, and so let's go for the fun part. So what is static analysis? So you check the Android manifest and XML. It's really, really worth checking the strings.xml, the manifest.xml. You can enumerate database. So you have tools on GitHub for this purpose, and of course you can check for sensitive data. Like you have to check for sensitive data because we still find them a lot. Also, first I will show you some example in the Android manifest. But first, yes, so I show you the first command before, and this one is to check the code for APK tool. So you just type this, and you will have the decom files here. It will look something like this. And so it's really how it will look like. So this is the example of the application Piva. So this file, the Android manifest, is the file where developers are going to describe essential information about the app. So it will going to be mentioning the package name, the components, the permissions, and hardware and software required by the app. So it's useful to check, as I mentioned before, when you are going to do your lab, it's going to be useful to check the min SDK version. So this is this way you are going to be able to know which API you need. And so on the screen you have a list of permissions. And it's always very interesting to analyze because the goal of the permission is to protect the privacy of the user. So it also needs to be giving proper access for the features of the application to work. But let's imagine that Piva is a social media app. Do you think that Piva should be able to access your phone calls if it was a social media app? No, thank you. No, because, well, in the case of a social media app, it's not something that should be required. So it can be tricky like this to understand, okay, so this app, why would it need this permission? But be very careful here. And if you want to have a list here of all the permissions available, and this is the list of permissions that are considered dangerous by the OWASP. So, and also, yes, also very important, the Kellytech malware I mentioned before, it had permission to read text messages, and that's how users were subscribed to premium content. So this is really critical. So let's check a second example. So you have two flags in the manifest. So you have the allow backup. So it's on by default. So this is still Piva. And so this could allow an attacker to backup data using ADB. And so, of course, it's safer as false. And you have, and so yes, it's enabled by default. And then you have the debuggable flag here. It's set to true. And it will allow to debug the application, and so an attacker could use this to access app data. So it should be set to false, but sometimes customer will give you the dev version, so this will be set to true. So if this happens, what I like to do is to mention in the report that for the production version, it should be set to false. And so in Piva, it was set to true. So how do we find API endpoints during the static analysis? So you are going to reverse engineer the app. We are going to decompile with APK tool, and we are going to search for keywords like HTTP or HTTPS. So we can look also for functions or classes that will handle network requests or responses. So I will show you a more precise example in the next slide. You can analyze the manifest file again, because you have there you will have metadata about the app. You will have also the declared permissions. You will have services and activities, and you can so look for permissions that are related to network communications. You can also analyze GS and AIDL files, sorry. So if it uses WebView or Android interface definition language, so AIDL, which is very hard to pronounce for a French person. So it's used for inter-process communication, and so you might find API endpoint there. And you have also an example in GS that is coming in the next slide. Like not the next one, but another one. But for this one, so this is an example of how APIs are called. So here we have an asynchronous task that makes a GET request to an API endpoint. So what is an asynchronous task? It's a way to perform a long-running operation in the background without blocking the user interface. So let's say you want to load a very, very large file. This is really, really helpful for this, because this way you can actually load the file, and it's going to be asynchronous. So you can see here that this class is used and executed in the instance. So next example is how to fetch an API in JavaScript. So here, the Android application that uses WebView to display the web page. And also in the web page, we see that GAs communicate with the API to fetch data. So you have the JavaScript code here of the function, and it will make a GET request. So you see this is the GET request here, and it actually call the endpoint here. So /api.example.com/data. So this is the endpoint. So this is definitely an API endpoint. So now let's see a finding that is really, really juicy in static analysis. OK. So we have hard-coded secrets. So during the static analysis, we can find hard-coded API keys. So in this article, this one, we still we can still see that lots of Android applications still have hard-coded secrets. And so in this video, Alisa Knight, the researcher, not only she found an API key, a private key, she found a private key with a blank password. So these things happen in real life. It's not something we see only in CTF, or it really happens in real life. So on the next slide, I'm going to show you an example of what an API looks like in strings.xml. So it's always useful to check this file. You can find it in this path here. And so this is a Google API key. This is actually a Google API key. So this is something you have to put in your report for obvious reasons. Yes, this should be stored outside of the app. So you have ways to securely store this outside of the app. So now I'm going to show you general tips for the static analysis. So you have on Jadix GUI a function that you use here that will help you to search in all the files this way. And you can choose the options and everything. So here I search for Firebase. OK. And do you know of a way to use a command line and search for a string? You have a grep function that is very useful for this, and personally it's my favorite. So what you would do is you would use this, for example, and then you can use. So you will first have decompiled the code, but you can use it in the code where it was decompiled. And if you use MobSafe, it can be convenient because there is actually an uploads directory with the code. And if you want more tips, on grep, on my Git book, I also share different grep commands. And now, here are some useful tools for the static analysis. So you have Firebase enum. Firebase is going to find Firebase instances. You have Firebase scan. It's going to help you to check for misconfigurations. You have Cloud enum. So you are going to be able to check for cloud instances from different providers. And also what can be useful is to enumerate database or public resources in the cloud. And sometimes you also have AWS secret key. So you can try to use it to access the resources on AWS. And so this is also something that is definitely worth to mention in a report. So using the command line, you can, yes, sorry, it's a mix. So grep is good. I insist. So the dynamic analysis. So what to check? So dynamic analysis is the part where we are going to intercept the traffic with burp, and we are going to analyze the traffic and make some modifications and see how the app is going to react. So this is the phase where we are going to look for tab jacking, which is a click jacking equivalent, but for mobile app. And so you can also check if you're able to capture screens that contain sensitive data. And you can check also for the OWASP top 10. There's a link later, I will show you. And so now I'm going to show you an example of a vulnerability. But first, I want to tell you how we find API endpoint. So to find API endpoint, we can use, these are typical, they can be used to find endpoints because they come back regularly. And you also have a use of a word list to fuzz for the API endpoints. So you can use it, and so this one is good, but you have plenty of the other word lists that are available online. So now I'm going to show you an example of a vulnerability, not for API, but for a mobile app, specifically. Up. So let's say, so we have to, so this is Piva I'm using, but let's say for the sake of the example that this is a banking application, and that this page is this page here is the details of your account, so your money and everything. So if I go to another web page, like another page on the phone, and I go back here, it still shows when it shouldn't, like it's actually leaking here. It should be white. There's actually a function that allows you to actually put this in white. So you have to report it. So some automatic tools. So you can use MobSF. So of course it's like any other pen test, and automatic tools are to use, but you have to keep your critical thinking, and you have to check for the false positives, and so do not rely only on those, but you can definitely use them to avoid false positive and to gain some time. But yeah, be careful with the false positive. So and also some automatic tools will probably not detect everything. So MobSF is very useful, and you can do static analysis and dynamic analysis with it. And Quark is also pretty good, and you can find common vulnerabilities in Android application, and you can also create POC, like for tabjacking evidence, which is a real gain of time. So now I'm going to talk about the common API vulnerabilities that we can look for. So here are common API events to look for. And you can find more here, like this is the OWASP top 10 from 2019. Like it's more recent now, I should update my slide. But one I often find is the BOLA, which is broken object level authorization. So it's when you are able to access to resources that do not belong to you. So for more details on API pen test, you can also check my Git book here, because also API pen test is something that I really enjoy to do. And also one thing to be careful is the context, because sometimes a vulnerability will be exploitable in the context of a web application, but not of a mobile application. So for example, if we take the CORS vulnerability, it's a mechanism that allows a web app to make a request to a different origin than the one from which the application was served. So it will prevent malicious websites to access sensitive information from other websites. So it's not applicable in Android application because it's not in a browser environment, except if the Android application interacts with a web service or an API that implements CORS. So this is really, like, to summarize, I would always recommend to check the context of your findings. And so sometimes when I'm in doubt, what I do is that I still report it as informational to put in to say, okay, I found this, but depending on the context, it can be exploitable or not. Okay, some general tips. So use a checklist. So to have all the checks for OWASP top 10, you can use it. Also, an amazing tool that works for this is Mind API. It's this one here. It's very, very good. Like it's basically a mind map, and you have all the steps. So I really find it useful, even as a checklist. And here is a snippet of a checklist from this very good book that I recommend. So it's specifically for GraphQL API pentest. And also, well, there are multiple advantages of using a checklist. So it's a way to make consistent and standardized pen test. It's a way to make sure that you cover every aspect of the target. It also helps you to stay organized, because I don't know you, but when I pen test, I find some things and I go on something else. So I write everything. So this way, I'm sure that I won't miss something. So the checklist is definitely helpful for this. And so for also, have detailed record of your testing activities, because sometimes your customer could ask you what you did. So it's a good way to have this already. And it makes you, of course, more efficient, and it helps you gain time. So now I'm going to show you how to report. So you can use, like, this is the usual structure of any pen test report. So you have the executive summary, which is going to be for the executives of the company. So it has to be high-level explanations with no technical details. It will have to contain a global posture and why findings and attack combinations could impact the company. And then you have the severity, like the vulnerability report. So, and this way, this is the moment where you can go in detail and in technical details, because this is going to be for the team who is going to apply the patches. So here is the example, like how to report like Ebola. So I took the example of Ebola. And so you put a description of the vulnerability in general, and then you go specifically in the context. So here we said we identified Ebola, and in the context of this application, we could bypass the access control, or we could do this and this with the unauthorized access. So this is really like a general description here, and then what it does in the context. And then you have the remediation. So how we would remediate to this specific vulnerability. And you can also put resources. I like to put resources because sometimes in a report it's very short, so it's a way to have more detailed explanation on a specific remediation. So you can get all the resources on my Git book here. So you will find Android tips, and you will find courses, you will find references, you will find bugs, vulnerable app to practice on, write-ups, you name it. You have many, many different resources that I worked to put on in here. And this is an article I wrote for Pentest magazine, so you can buy the article, but there's also an article on Android and API Pentest, and this one is free, and it's on the blog. And if you want to remember, if you make sure you remember what I said, you have a quiz to go. And I'm going to leave you with this thought. So if you're interested in continuing to learn about pentest specialization in mobiles, I would say it really aligns, because this article mentions that as strings are evolving with everything ambient computing and mobiles, it's going to be at the heart of future transformation, so smartphones are not here to disappear. Thank you. So if you have questions, yes? Yes? So you will